Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave,
on behalf of every father and every mother,
wings for freedom. On behalf of our
warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Oh boy, a lot's been happening this week. We got a real big show for you guys, a lot to cover. If you could, in the chat down there, please do hit the like and subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. It helps spread the word about the stream and keep you updated on all the stuff we do over at Tochnyi. We've been busy bees over here, so we'll get to that later. Also, if you could, you can check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky, and of course go to our website at tochnyi.info. We'd really like you guys to check that out. We actually do have a new article up, interactive map, I should say. It's definitely worth checking out. As I said, we'll talk about that soon. Of course, if you guys have any questions in the chat, you're welcome to type out your questions. We'll have a Q&A section at the end, and we'll do our best to get to all your questions. First I'll present the news. That'll be followed by Mr. German Aid to Ukraine's report, followed by Stanimir's report on what's going on in the Russian economy. And then we'll have a little discussion about all the drones flying over Europe right now with our colleague 122 and Erlend and maybe some other people. And then we'll maybe talk about a few other things, and then we'll do Q&A. So without any further delay, I will now present the news. These are the main headlines as of September 28th, 2025. First up, we have operations. The Ukrainian military leadership has confirmed that its forces carried out an operation targeting the Afipsky oil refinery in Russia's Krasnodar region. The action, conducted overnight on September 26th, was coordinated by the unmanned systems forces together with other branches of Ukraine's defense network. The stated goal of the strike was to disrupt the opponent's ability to continue large-scale assaults by limiting access to fuel and ammunition. The Afipsky facility processes around 6.25 million tons of crude annually and is a key producer of gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel, much of which is directed to support Russian military logistics. Reports from the scene indicate that the strike resulted in a blaze, although the full extent of the damage and its impact on operations are still being verified. Ukrainian forces used drones to strike 3 gas distribution facilities in the Russian-controlled part of Luhansk on September 25th, starting a fire. Photos released by Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Command show the aftermath of the attack. The attack specifically hit a gas routing station supplying the thermal power plant in the town of Shastya, which means happiness. Ukrainian officials highlighted the symbolic nature of the strike, along with its practical impact on Russian-controlled energy infrastructure. Ukrainian military intelligence carried out a coordinated naval drone strike on Russia's oil terminals in Tuapse and Novorossiysk on September 24th, halting major export activities along the Black Sea coast. According to a source in the agency, the operation targeted strategic logistics hubs, including the state-run Transneft oil loading complex and the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal in Novorossiysk, both of which play a crucial role in moving Russian crude, including shipments via the so-called Shadow Fleet. Together, these sites had the capacity to handle around 2 million barrels of oil per day. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium confirmed that its Novorossiysk office sustained damage. This consortium is a partnership involving Russian, Kazakh, and international stakeholders and operates a pipeline linking Kazakhstan's western oil fields with Novorossiysk Sea Terminal. In Tuapse, the strike destroyed the oil loading pier at one of Russia's largest terminals. A Ukrainian analyst noted that the attack highlighted serious shortcomings in Russia's defense of its Black Sea ports, as chaotic anti-air fire reportedly struck civilian structures, damaging cars and homes, and spreading fear among residents. Russian officials stated that 2 people lost their lives and 6 others were injured in Novorossiysk, with a hotel located about 2 kilometers from the port and several surrounding buildings also damaged. Ukraine's military intelligence agency reported that its forces struck occupied Crimea on September 25th, destroying 2 Russian An-26 transport aircraft and 2 radar installations. According to the report, Ukrainian special forces set the aircraft on fire and eliminated both a surface surveillance radar system and an MR-10M1 MIS M1 coastal radar station. The AN-26, a twin-engine transport plane dating back to the Soviet era, is capable of moving around 40 troops or roughly 5.5 tons of cargo. The targeted radar systems are used for early detection and tracking of surface vessels, forming part of Russia's coastal defense network. An overnight blast on September 26 damaged a section of railway in Russia's Pskov Oblast. The explosion struck the line between Luga and Pskov, which carries both passenger and freight trains. Russian railways rerouted 2 passenger trains as a result. The regional governor said there were no injuries and no derailments, adding that emergency services were on site, and he urged residents to stay calm. The extent of the damage was not specified. This was the second such incident in the oblast this month. On September 14th, another explosion hit the St. Petersburg-Pskov line, derailing a locomotive and destroying 15 fuel tankers. Earlier in the month, Ukraine's military intelligence claimed responsibility for a complex joint operation with special forces that disrupted traffic on the Oryol-Kursk line and resulted in the deaths of 2 Russian National Guard members. Ukrainian drones have also repeatedly targeted railway infrastructure in Rostov, Voronezh, and Volgograd Oblast since late July, briefly halting or slowing traffic. Retired officer and defense analyst Viktor Kevliuk has described these actions as part of a deliberate strategy of constant small-scale strikes meant to steadily degrade Russian logistics capacity. Russian officials have not named any suspect in connection with the September 26th incident. Ukraine's Air Force announced that its troops brought down a Russian Su-34 fighter bomber in Zaporizhzhia Oblast during the early hours of September 25th. The downing reportedly occurred around 4 a.m. near the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front, with the aircraft said to have been in the midst of striking the city with guided bombs at the time. The Su-34 is a medium-range jet dating back to the Soviet period and is designed for both bombing and combat roles. Ukrainian forces had previously targeted this type of aircraft in strikes on Russian air bases and have reported multiple successful engagements against them in flight. As of now, the confirmation of the downed jet cannot be independently verified. Ukraine is establishing a new branch within its armed forces called the Air Defense Unmanned Systems Forces, which will function under the Air Force, according to the Commander-in-Chief in a statement on September 26. This move comes as Russia continues daily long-range drone attacks on Ukrainian cities and ramps up production of explosive UAVs. Analysts have cautioned that Ukraine could soon face waves of up to 1,000 incoming drones. Unlike the existing unmanned systems forces, which carry out offensive strikes against targets in Russian-held territory, this new branch is dedicated solely to defending Ukrainian airspace. It will rely on interceptor drones to protect urban areas and key infrastructure, working alongside tactical aviation and surface-to-air missile units. Syrskyi stated that the command structure is already in place, subunits are being deployed, and radar coverage is being expanded. Training for personnel is ongoing, and systems are already in operational use. He added that both domestically produced and foreign-supplied interceptor drones have demonstrated success rates of more than 70% against Russian Shahed attack drones. The Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration announced the completion of the first anti-drone tunnel in the region, with 3 additional tunnels nearing 60% completion. Ivan Fedorov, the head of the administration, stated that this marks the first phase of a major construction initiative aimed at safeguarding key roads near the front line from enemy drone strikes. The tunnels are designed using steel, wire, and mesh to shield both transportation routes and civilians. The project is funded by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense and is carried out in coordination with the State Transport Special Service. Similar protective measures have been implemented in other regions, with anti-drone nets being installed in Kherson for nearly a year. The new tunnels and nets are reported to be resistant to both Russian UAV attacks and adverse weather conditions, providing additional protection for critical logistics routes. Up next, we have economy and aid. Denmark has announced a new military aid package for Ukraine worth around $407 million, according to the Defense Ministry of the country. The defense minister briefed the Foreign Policy Committee on September 26th about the 27th aid package, which allocates around $250 million to support Ukraine's defense industry through the Danish model, with another $156 million designated for additional contributions. The defense minister emphasized the Ukraine's defense industry still has untapped potential, which is why Denmark is increasing its funding under this framework. The Danish model is designed to strengthen Ukraine's domestic defense production capabilities. Between 2024 and 2027, Denmark has committed roughly $920 million for this initiative and has approved total donation commitments of around $2.9 billion over the same period. These commitments have been made possible in large part through contributions from European Union partners and other allies. Denmark's assistance also includes efforts to boost production capacity. In June of 2025, Copenhagen provided $77.8 million to launch Ukrainian defense manufacturing on Danish territory, and reports from early September indicated that the Ukrainian company FPRT would begin producing solid rocket fuel in Denmark by December 1st. As always, keep up the good work, Denmark. The European Commission has proposed using frozen Russian assets as collateral to fund a new €140 billion loan for Ukraine, according to reporting by Politico, citing a note sent to EU member governments ahead of an ambassadors' meeting. The proposal is expected to be further discussed by European leaders in Copenhagen next week. According to the plan, Ukraine would not need to begin repayment until Russia ends its military campaign and pays reparations. At that point, the European Union would return the assets to Euroclear, the Belgian institution currently holding them. The loan would be released in installments and directed toward both defense cooperation and Ukraine's general budget requirements. The European Commission also suggested revising the sanction extension mechanism by replacing unanimous consent with qualified majority voting, a move aimed at preventing potential vetoes, such as from Hungary, that could result in the assets being unfrozen and then sent back to Russia. Up next, we have international relations. Polish President Karol Nawrocki, I'm sorry to all Polish speakers out there, has signed a law granting temporary protection to Ukrainians who fled the war, resolving weeks of uncertainty over their legal status. Ukraine's ambassador to Poland, Vasyl Bodnar, welcomed the move, saying that it ends confusion affecting tens of thousands of Ukrainians living in the country, and he thanked Poland for its cooperative approach to such a sensitive matter. This was the president's second attempt to pass the law. He had vetoed an earlier version at the end of August, arguing that social benefits under Poland's 800-plus program should be limited to Ukrainians employed in the country. The new legislation is signed into effect and formalizes residence protection and aid for Ukrainians impacted by the war. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated on September 26 that drones, likely originating from Hungary, had crossed into Ukrainian airspace along the border. This marks the first reported case of such an incident. Zelensky said Ukrainian forces detected the incursions and that early assessments indicate that the unmanned aircraft appeared to be surveying the industrial capacity of border regions. He ordered that all available information be verified and that immediate reports be compiled for each recorded occurrence. The Hungarian foreign minister rejected the allegation, writing on Twitter that Zelensky was imagining threats and accusing him of having a, quote, anti-Hungarian obsession. Ukraine's foreign minister responded, accusing Hungary's government of hypocrisy and of undermining both Ukraine and Europe while acting in alignment with Moscow's interests. Moldova's Electoral Commission has barred the pro-Russian Heart of Moldova party from competing in Sunday's parliamentary election after a court ruled the group engaged in voter bribery and illegal financing. Authorities said the move was necessary as they face an unprecedented campaign of Russian interference aimed at destabilizing the vote. Officials reported that 74 individuals were detained this week on the suspicion of preparing violent disruptions, alleging that they had traveled to Serbia for training that included firearms practice, protest tactics, and stage provocations under the guidance of Russian operatives. Each participant was reportedly paid around €400. The banned party is a major part of the Russia-aligned Patriotic Electoral Bloc, considered one of the chief rivals to the pro-EU Party of Action and Solidarity. Party leader Irina Vla was also barred from entering Latvia, Estonia, and Poland after those governments accused her of assisting Moscow's efforts to manipulate Moldova's election process. At the same time, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service claimed without evidence that the European Union plans to use NATO troops to occupy Moldova after the vote. Russian-backed networks have been accused of orchestrating protests, organizing Moldovan citizens abroad to vote strategically, and running extensive online disinformation campaigns designed to undermine confidence in the government and sway the election outcome. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Hello guys, As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. Just an information in advance, this week I have to pronounce a lot of Ukrainian cities, which all of our regular viewers know I'm very bad at. So sorry in advance for what you are about to hear. We are starting with a donation I made public on Monday. The German government has co-financed 2 Volkswagen minibuses, which have been handed over to the city of Kyiv in the Chernihiv region. They will be used to support educational institutions and emergency operations in the city. On Thursday, I made public that another 5 of these buses have been co-financed by the German government and have been handed over to the Tochnyi, Rohan, Balaklia, and the Staryi Saitiv territorial communities in the Kharkiv region. I hope I got that right. They will be used to transport humanitarian cargo, respond to emergency calls, and more. And last but not least, emergency services in the Chernihiv and Dobryanska communities received 2 firefighting vehicles, 1 specialized vehicle with a control center and a passenger car, and finally also a field kitchen trailer from the German city of Segeberg. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Germany to Ukraine. So, Mr. Stanimir, we have a lot to cover this week in addition to your standard report. So I think we'll just get right into it. First, I believe there were 2 more Russian window incidents, or I call them window incidents, but they happen in a variety of suspicious ways. But sometimes we get mixed up because it makes it into the Western press a little late, and so we cover it the week before, stuff like that. So were there any notable window incidents in Russia this week that are worth remarking upon, and were they mentioned in Russian media? Go ahead.
Well, one of them was a former transport official from St. Petersburg who killed himself, apparently, or at least that's the version they're going with. I have less information for that one. The other one was a Duma member from, I want to say Krasnodar. He also had a small, well, not small, medium-sized construction firm. And he was found hanging from a tree, hanged with his hands tied behind his back. And the Russian police are considering it as a suicide, which is very, very weird to commit suicide by climbing up a tree several meters up and then tying your hands behind your back and then jumping with the rope around your head.
Yeah, very, very interesting incident for sure. And then my only other question was, there was a lot of reporting in the Western media this week that Russia is raising taxes in response to their growing budget deficit. I think you've mentioned that before. So is this just old information they're kind of picking up now for some reason, or is there anything worth commenting on about all the coverage of this?
Yeah, they're raising 2 forms of taxes. One is a smaller one that's going to bring in less revenue. It's a direct tax of 5% on gambling bets, and also raising the profit tax for gambling companies to 25%, up from 20%. And the other one is increasing the VAT by 2%. That's part of the budget. So yes, there was talk about it, but it's officially part of the 2026 budget. So it will come into effect on January 1st, 2026. And as part of the VAT, there's a thing in Russia which is a simplified tax reporting, which is for small companies, really small companies, which have 60 million rubles in revenue per year, and they didn't have to pay VAT until this new budget. With the new budget, they're dropping the threshold for 10 million rubles in revenue a year, so that will basically cover all small businesses will now have to pay VAT in Russia, which might devastate the segment.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like that's basically accurate coverage from the media about this, which is always good to see. So the next topic is the big one. You've been working on a map, sir. It's been an interesting experience. It's been a couple weeks now. You've been doing it, and we think it's a good time to just like have a little retrospective. So you've been tracking the gasoline shortages, I would say longer than anyone I know. And it's been there were so many shortages. You were like, I've got to put this on a map, which makes sense. And so you started making a map. Can we maybe get the map up? Maybe the GIF up? That'd be cool. So you start making a map, and basically, it's a pretty simple concept for a map. Obviously, there would be ways to make it more granular, but like, you know, we can't do every possible thing. But the basic idea is when there's a gas shortage reported in a Russian region, the map turns a certain color, and then as the shortage continues, it gets like a darker color. So the regions with the earliest reports of shortages would have the darkest color, basically, whereas the more recent ones would be a lighter color. And then obviously ones that don't have a shortage are colored gray. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the map has become. I would describe it, for people who can't see the map right now, who are just listening, as like the European side of Russia and like Siberia are almost all red. All of Siberia, all the east of Russia is red, and a lot of the west of Russia is red. And then there's like one part in like the middle bit of Russia that's not affected yet. So it's, I don't know, it's a very interesting map. I think it was received in very interesting ways. A lot of people use the map, which is always good. We like to see that. We like to see people on social media and also sometimes traditional media like circulate our graphics. We try to make useful graphics that people can easily understand. I think Stanimir did a good job with this map. And yeah, it was basically well received. I think there were some Russians who were a little upset about it. They basically, I would say there were like 3 camps of Russians. One of them was, well, I'll put it this way. Everybody was kind of mad because they were like, why are there these stupid islands up north of Russia don't have any people on them? And like, why would there be a gas shortage there? There's just penguins, basically. And the answer is obvious. Like, it's a map of all the Russian regions. Like, think like U.S. states. And if Alaska was a state that we were marking on that map, then the islands would be marked, even though they're not. Some of them aren't inhabited, right? So that's just part of the Arkhangelsk Oblast, and it's, you know, that's why those islands are colored the way they are. And then, so that was like one of the, I guess, like complaints or feedback you'd call it. People were like confused about that. It seems pretty simple to me. Stanimir, of course, always put like an explanation of that in the tweets, but you know, people seem to still struggle with it. So it is what it is, right? I understand people are clicking through a lot of stuff. They want the information very quick. They don't have time to read anything. So yeah, that's one camp. Of course, the other camp was just Russians saying like, this isn't happening at all. Like, we completely deny that any of this is happening. And I guess, like, if you want to be a little more charitable, you could say that, like, well, you know, if Stanimir finds one gas station in this region, then the whole map changes color. But, you know, I think this is still, obviously, we're just trying to visualize all the different shortages, right? Like, that's what Stanimir's trying to do. So you know, for me, it makes sense the way he's doing it. But they were like I'd say Russians don't like talking about the gas shortage. We're pointing that out, and we're very upset. So they were either denying it completely outright or like trying to minimize it by saying, oh, it's just a little, you know, it's just a localized thing. But I think it's pretty obvious from the map it's not a localized thing. So that's, and then of course it comes full circle, and Rybar like stole Stanimir's map and made his own version of it, and he says it's even worse than what Stanimir says. So like, it's just, I don't get, like, some Russians are saying it never happened at all, and then Rybar is saying, oh, like, here it is, and it's real bad. I love that it's like, I don't know, there's some things about Rybar's I like the blue. I've been pushing for blue background for a while.
But Joe, Joseph, maybe we should explain who Rybar is, because even though most people here maybe know, there could be people that doesn't know.
Yeah, so Rybar's like a Russian, like I guess you call him a mill blogger. That's usually what they call them in the media. You know, I would say he's reasonably trusted by the Russians as far as their social media goes. I don't quite know how to put it. And the other time Rybar comes up is when there's like a lot of military movements going on. Ukraine usually has an information blackout. And what that means is we're kind of stuck with Rybar's hot takes on what's going on if he starts reporting losses and things. But as you know, we've talked to Andrew about this a lot, as Andrew will well tell you, like Rybar's not an accurate representation of what's going on. There's ways you have to read the tea leaves of his and things. Like he'll exaggerate losses so he can later say the Russians had a glorious counterattack and all this. So he's like I guess like you'd say a Russian mill blogger / map maker. And I don't know, it's just funny that he kind of stole Stanimir's idea, and he also like said it was even worse than what Stanimir was suggesting. So to me, it's just like there's these two extremes of Russians saying it's not happening at all, and then another Russian source saying, oh, it's happening and it's bad. So yeah, that's and also of course there's like way too much text. That's like a classic Rybar map thing, is he just puts like an ocean of text on there. Which I think that's one strength of our map. We don't have too much text.
And also, when they were talking about this, when they were retweeting people inside Russia, usually inside Moscow, going around and showing gas stations that didn't have queues and didn't have shortages, the same afternoon, an actual Russian media outlet would go out and it would immediately find shortages inside Moscow even. So usually Russian local news is far more diligent when it comes to finding this stuff compared to the propagandists you find on Twitter and in social media, who just post things saying there is no shortage. And then, for example, MSK1 went around Moscow twice in the last 3 days, and it found shortages and also in the big chains. So Lukoil and Tebo, which is Lukoil's second gas station chain, had shortages of A92 gasoline as recently as this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy anyone would deny it. As you said, like the government has been trying to deny it for like a few weeks, and in various forms. And as you said, like there's no denying this. There's just too many pictures of gas stations saying we don't have any gasoline, go away, to just deny it's happening outright. So the idea that anyone would be denying it at this point is kind of nuts. But as you said, the government sort of still is. So. Yeah, like I don't know, is there anything else you want to say about the map itself, Stanimir? And then we can maybe talk about like the gas shortages and like what they mean.
Yeah, something that people usually ask me is if the map, if the regions that first reported shortages still have shortages as of this day. And I'd say on my map, I think the only region that I'm iffy about is Sverdlovsk, which kind of stands out because it was a story about gas stations along a major road that passes through it that didn't have gasoline around certainly sort of a large section of the road. It's just right now it's pink in the middle where nothing else is red. So that's the only region I'm iffy about. For example, Arkhangelsk, that keeps coming up because of the island chains north of it that are part of it, they reported serious gasoline shortages again this morning. So that is still ongoing. Vladivostok, which is on the eastern side, where there's which is in Primoria and next with Sakhalin, both of them reported gasoline shortages this week as well. And we know that for them, for example, A98 and A101 gasoline is not going to come anytime soon in big enough volumes to satisfy demand, because they're only getting, at least as far as I read, around 60 tons, was it either per week or per month, and that's not enough to satisfy demand in those regions. Just that the Russian refineries are not releasing enough gasoline of higher octanes.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that kind of takes us to like where we're at now. It's looking pretty bad in terms of. I'll put it this way again. The map is showing like if there's a media report of a gas shortage in that like region, then Stanimir is marking it on the map. But I think this map at a minute, like we can't prove that they're happening in gas stations like a large scale of gas stations this way, but what we can prove is it's not like a local problem or crisis. It's very clearly spreading at a rapid pace across Russia, and I think that kind of says enough by itself that this is a huge problem in developing. Go ahead, Sammy.
Well, we have some data that came out that Kommersant reported on. So something like 2.6% of gasoline stations that a certain consulting group covers had stopped selling gasoline, which I have to clarify that's as of the 22nd of September. So that's a week old information. And when they say stopped selling gasoline, that also might mean that they haven't stopped selling, that they have stopped selling gasoline entirely. Because a lot of the gas stations you see which say they don't have gasoline, they're still selling to officials, to emergency services, and to people who have contracts as part of a company contract. So usually that's what's happening. First, they stop selling to the public, the general public, and only then after a few weeks, they stop selling altogether. So we know that Russia has something like 30,000 gas stations. So that means that we have close to probably 700, 800 gas stations already not operating or selling only diesel. We also know that for some regions, like for example, Mariel, which is on the map because of this information, 12 to 14% of gas stations have stopped operating there. That's as of a week ago. We know that in Crimea, 50% of the gas stations are not operating. That's crazy for that region. And that's why that's the region where we expect the first gas prices over 100 rubles to emerge. The other place that might happen is in Sakhalin Oblast, where prices are now at 98 rubles for A95. In Crimea, they're at 99 rubles for A95. And we also know data from the governor of Sevastopol, because that's a separate administrative region from Crimea. He said that they had enough gasoline. It was estimated for only 950 cars to get fully refueled as of last morning.
So in terms of measurable effects, I think we can assume there's like a few things are happening. I think you pointed out an interesting one, which is a lot of the Russian units in the occupied regions and like Crimea and other places, they rely on civilian vehicles, a lot like the Ukrainians, for like the in-point logistics, I guess you'd call it, like getting things from whatever depot they're at to like their actual unit. They use a lot of like gasoline civilian cars for that stuff. And that's true of both sides. So that's one way the shortage might have a real impact on the front line. Then, of course, you already mentioned gas prices going up. That's another direct impact. I assume that the high gas prices and just kind of the general shortage is not going to be great for public opinion. So that's another effect. Do you see any other like effects directly as a result of the current trajectory that the Russian gas situation is going?
Well, for some regions like Rostov, it's very bad because the local public transport isn't very reliable. That's one of the worst regions in Russia when it comes to public transport. The other thing is that they forced actual sites that did investigations on fuel prices, like Fuel Price Rule, to show the prices that are from the Rostat official data. So instead of showing something like 75 or 80 rubles per liter, they showed gasoline at 62, 63. The other thing that's going to happen is they're called vertically integrated companies. So those are gas stations from the big chains. Like here you can see a picture of Tebo, which is, like I said, part of Lukoil. That's their second chain. They have one that's under the Lukoil brand, and they have this one under the Tebo. They're going to be forced to sell at low prices the production that their refineries do. But because the price of gasoline was too high in August, that means they're not getting any gasoline subsidies from the Russian government. So for these Russian companies that are major oil producers, August is going to be a bad month for them in terms of revenue from gasoline sales, because they're only getting what they're getting from the gas stations instead of getting also a fuel subsidy to equalize their profits to what would be if they sold it abroad. Also, when it comes to the sales, we've seen that because of the shortages and because of the lack of refining capacity, it has started affecting diesel too. So what does that mean? There have been few places where we've actually seen reports of diesel fuel running out at gas stations. That's in Novosibirsk and also in Crimea for a bit. But what we've actually seen is, and that's not on the map because it's not gas stations, it's not direct purchasing, but it's that Russian farmers in central Russia, so we're talking Chelyabinsk, Novosibirsk, in those places, they have problems getting diesel fuel. And if they're buying diesel fuel, they're finding it at prices that are 20-25% higher than what is the official price on the St. Petersburg Stock Exchange. So something like 95,000 rubles per ton. And they're saying in official statements of the Organization of Farmers for that region that the harvest might go bad. So this is something we should keep in mind, that because the refining capacity has been degraded so much and exports of diesel were only canceled on Friday night, I think, they are not going to be able to provide promptly enough diesel for farmers this year for the end of the harvest season. Also, when we talk about things that are going to happen to Russian gas stations, as of the 19th of September, they were losing 4.3 rubles per each liter of A92 sold and 3.8 rubles per each liter of A95 sold. Now, independent gas stations have resorted to raising prices, and like we said, they've gotten to 99 rubles in some places. Usually it's closer to 70, 75. 80 is in the distant regions. For example, in Karelia, they have issues with 85 rubles for A95 gasoline. What is happening is either they sell at these high prices or they sell at a big loss. And some are deciding to just stop working, because if they sell at the high price, the Russian Federal Anti-Monopoly Service comes in and fines them for several million rubles if they want to really do that. So yeah, there are multiple consequences of this, and they're branching out and they're reaching more and more regions.
Right. And so like Russia, what I'm hearing, I'm just trying to understand and like boil it down. What I'm hearing is like first off, Russia produces a lot more diesel than gasoline. That's something you mentioned early on, was when the gasoline shortages started. You said like, well, Russia uses like 90% of the gasoline they produce. So if there's really is like a small production shortfall, then it's a big deal. Whereas with diesel, they produce a lot more, but I think you've already outlined like why there's been a lot of basically mismanagement if the goal is to make sure that there's enough diesel. So that's resulting now in potentially, like, I'd say, what would you say, localized shortages of diesel in certain key areas, which are the issue is if you don't have gasoline, it's bad because obviously your civilians, can't get around. That's what civilians use. But once you start running out of diesel, that's like, real bad. Like then you can't have trucks moving stuff around, tractors, as you were talking about, farmers. So diesel shortages, in addition to gasoline shortages, would spell like a real crisis for, I would say, Russia. So that's, I'd say, one reason we're like keeping such an eye on it. But yeah, did I summarize okay the current situation?
Yeah, and also there's another thing. We have the data from the St. Petersburg Stock Exchange, Commodities Exchange, not Stock Exchange, that's a different thing. We have the data from them, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, diesel sales on the wholesale market were down something like 30% compared to 2024. So because diesel sales, this is summer diesel that's currently still being sold, it's going to be shifted into mid-season diesel and then into winter diesel as time progresses and things get colder. But right now, summer diesel sales are down. So this wholesale market, because they're exporting too much on the international market, is not providing enough supply for the domestic demand. And that's why you get these shortages, and that's why you get farmers being essentially extorted by prices that are 20-25% higher. And also because they made it so that the commodities exchange introduced sort of a price fixing for diesel. It has the same rules as it had for gasoline. So you can only have 15 bids for railroad loads. You can have 10 bids per day for diesel via pipeline, and the price can go up only by 0.001%. The price of diesel on the stock exchange, on the commodities exchange, is now separated. It's no longer tracking what's happening in the market for the diesel depot that are actually selling directly to customers and not for future delivery. We also have another issue which is not so well explained. We still have refineries offering to sell things that don't exist. What does that mean? There are gas stations that have ordered fuel 45 to 30 days ago, and they still haven't received that shipment, which means the refinery is not able to physically produce those amounts to ship to them, or has other priorities. So there are gas stations that are going to go bankrupt because they bought a lot of gasoline and it was never delivered. And they spent all their money on that lot and they can't buy a new lot because they don't have the funds. They're already stuck with that purchase, which is not going to be delivered anytime soon. Because 45 days for the delivery of gasoline from a relatively close by refinery is way too much.
Yeah, so I think, as you pointed out, at several places, like the small gasoline stations are being squeezed really hard here, and the big gasoline companies, a lot of them are tied to like oil outfits and stuff. They're like, they feel the squeeze, and especially with diesel right now, the issue is like they want to export it because they get more money for it. Because, as you pointed out, there's various mechanisms in Russia. In Russia, they're basically like you have to sell it cheap, and also the government subsidizes it. So that costs like the government extra money to have to subsidize extra diesel, and it costs the producers a lot of money because they're like missing out on profits, basically. So it's a bad choice the Russians have to make. Do they, make less money and solve this crisis, or do they solve the crisis? I think the choice is obvious, but they seem to be kind of hesitant for that reason. So yeah, I don't know, a lot of gas stuff. We got to get to your actual general report about the Russian economy. So anything else you want to say about the gas crisis before we move on?
Yeah, just one more thing. If it comes to the point that a Russian governor is forced to admit in public that there are shortage issues in his region, expect that outside of the main cities and the districts with the smaller cities, it's hell on earth. There's no gasoline anywhere. There's mostly gasoline in the main capital of the region, and everywhere else it's terrible. We've seen buses not taking kids to school because they couldn't get gasoline. And in this case, we're calling expanded vans buses because that's what usually takes kids to school in Russia. And we've seen reporters going out on a particular road and driving till the end of the district and not seeing any gas station with actually selling gasoline, all of them not having that. And for the region that was the worst, with Nizhny Novgorod, the governor said a week ago that they're going to fix the situation shortly. And he started from having issues in the northern part of the region, in the outlying rural districts, and now there are shortages in Nizhny Novgorod city as well. So gas stations there don't have gasoline. And I think the first one of the big chains that's going to have problems is Lukoil and Tboil. They've already started having shortages in major cities, Smolensk, Nizhny Novgorod also, and I think Gazprom's chain is next to have shortages everywhere. So we're seeing a market that suggests that the damage to refineries and the number of refineries that are out of order because of breakdowns or damage from drones or in maintenance is much higher than the assumed 25% that we've seen so far. And one more thing to add, that Russian experts so far have been very unhelpful to the public because they've been saying things like, even with the refineries in maintenance, we have enough gasoline. This is just an economics problem because the price is high. No one's asking why the price is high, because of scarcity. So yeah, they've provided misleading information to the point that some Russians believe this is an artificial shortage to fill up the budget.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, as you said, and it's pretty obvious why the price is going up, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be getting any better. Like it's Ukrainian drones are still striking the oil processing facilities and transportation facilities. So yeah, this crisis isn't going away. They can deny it all they want, but it's pretty bad. So yeah, Stanimir, thanks for making the map. I think it's great. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. I think it's always good when we help create visual information that's easily consumable for people. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's like you did a real service to the internet. So thanks for that. So Stanimir, I know you always have a general report about the Russian economy, and we got to get to some other crazy stuff going on in Europe. So yeah, without any delay, let's go ahead and hear your report about the Russian economy this week.
Yeah, so what we're going to start with is the new Russian budget. They usually have a budget for the next year and then a proposal, so plans for the budget for the next 2 years after that. And what we have seen is that it's going to be, the next 3 years are going to have deficits as well, which is 7 years in a row of deficits. For 2026, it's 1.6% of GDP. For 2027, it's 1.2% of GDP. And for 2028, it's 1.3% of GDP. And I have to point out that so far, since 2022, they've never hit the deficit target they set. They usually are way above it. And for example, for 2025, with the new adjustments, they're going to have 5.7 trillion rubles in debt, in deficit, or 2.6% of GDP. And they're also going to raise 2.2 trillion rubles in extra debt this year, on top of the 3.5 trillion for the year. So the news that the estimate that people were giving from inside Russia that deficit, if nothing's done, might reach 8 trillion is now basically confirmed, because that's what we get if you combine the two figures. And we should expect that the deficits for the next few years also grow significantly, and we have to see how they're actually going to tackle the deficits for 2025. What they did for the VAT, we already discussed, but we haven't talked about what they're projecting this is going to raise. So the 2% increase in VAT, they're expecting to raise 1.3 trillion rubles extra in 2026. Now, there's a problem with that, because for the first half of 2025, they managed to raise only 4.8 trillion rubles in VAT for the entirety of it. So I don't know if they're going to hit that target, given that for half a year they have under 5 trillion rubles. So that looks optimistic. Additionally, we had some Bulgarian news. The Bulgarian Prime Minister mentioned that Bulgaria is going to cancel the contracts for the transit of Russian gas through Bulgaria, which is supposed to happen from January 1st, 2026. Initially, I haven't seen it done in writing, but if that happens, countries that are relying on Russian gas via South Stream, upstream from Bulgaria, are going to have significant issues replacing those deliveries. And for the budget, one final thing, that for 2026, they expect the GDP to grow by 1.3%. I think that's very optimistic, given that they expect investments to go down by 0.5%. And also that I don't think for 2025, the Russian GDP will hit 1.3%, even the official Rosstat data. What they also plan is to increase the minimum wage to 27,000 rubles. So that is it for the main stories. When it comes to banking, they had bad news in August. So for the August results, Russia's banks, their net profit for August decreased by 48% compared to August 2024. And it's only 203 billion rubles when it was almost 400 billion rubles in August 2024. And an example of that is the net profit of VTB was down 3.2% for the first 8 months of the year. But if we look at just August, it's down by 41.1%, down to 23.9 billion rubles. So this is affecting all banks. When it comes to commodities, we start with metals. So we have good news for Russia because it managed to increase its export of aluminum to China by 70% for the first 8 months of 2025 to $4.1 billion worth, which is more than they exported for the entirety of 2024. However, they have also a problem with that because they have to impose a 20% anti-dumping duty on aluminum foil from China going into the Eurasian Economic Union, and that was a request by Rusal, the Russian aluminum producer, which is making a killing in China but doesn't want China to destroy its market within Russia. When it comes to grain, the Russian Ministry of Agriculture says that 87 million tons of wheat were harvested in 2025 and 121 million tons of grain overall. However, I would caution that because we're seeing data from the farmers that they're not actually being able to harvest again due to that diesel shortage. And these are the regions in central Russia and the Volga that are supposed to offset the issues with the southern Russia harvest this year. When it comes to coal, they had some good news for metallurgical coal. For coke, it rose in price by 8.2% from the Far East exports, and for pulverized coal fuel by 10.9%. This is due to growing Chinese demand ahead of the Chinese holidays, so they want to stock up on metallurgical coal quickly before they go into the holiday season. This should subside overall for the remainder of the year, however. And when it comes to construction, the construction market, the volume of apartments in new buildings that were on offer in September 2025 is down 48% compared to September 2024. This is specifically for Moscow, and it's the lowest it's been since 2021. Again, the Moscow market is a bit detached from the rest of Russia's markets. So when it comes to apartments, we usually lump them with the 1 million cities. So the cities over 1 million and the two regions around Moscow, which is the Moscow region and Leningrad region. So for it has a shortage of housing within Moscow, though Russian real estate developers aren't very profitable despite that because they can't launch new projects there. And when it comes to meat for shashlik and interesting data points, in Russia, sales decreased by 11% for the period of May to August 2025. This is because of, according to them, the cold summer, which had led to less barbecues and less people going out on their lawns and doing barbecues. I'm not sure that's the direct correlation, but we'll see.
I feel the need to say shashlik is kebab for people who... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, shashlik is kebab, but it's generally all barbecue meat in Russia is lumped in that category. Yeah, so we also had that Russian fitness services grew in cost by 18.5% in 2025, and it's expected to grow another 15%. However, they're still opening new facilities with 509 new facilities open in 2025, bringing the total to 10,200. The Russian KDV group, which produces confectionery fats, said that it's going to increase the prices of its goods because of the increased price of raw material. So wafer fat from palm oil, which is going to increase the most out of its goods that it sells to companies, is going to go up in price by 48.1%, and the other things are going to go up in price by around 20%, 25%. Again, due to the increased price of things like palm oil and coconut oil for imports in Russia. We also have the continued decline in the sales of strong liquor in Russia. So for the first 8 months of 2025, vodka sales are down almost 4%, and cognac sales are down close to 9.5%. This is again due to the increased prices by the Ministry of Finance. They have two mechanisms to increase price. One is the excise tax on alcohol, and the other is the minimum price for vodka and cognac, which in Russia is set via law from the government. And the final interesting news story that I gathered for this week is the Georgian exports of blueberries to Russia. Effectively, Russia bought almost the entire blueberry harvest in Georgia, buying 95.5% of all the blueberries produced in Georgia. This is likely because Russian blueberries this year suffered significantly from the bad weather during the growing periods and the colds and the frosts, and also the sudden drought that also came and hit them. So that's why they bought up all of Georgia's supply. And finally, we come to inflation and debt. So for the period of the 16th to the 22nd of September, Russian inflation returned to what was closer to what was before the month of July and August. And it came in at 0.08%. However, I have to say something. They're pretending the fuel price increases don't exist. According to them, the fuel prices are up double what the inflation is, or 0.5%, 0.7%. That's nowhere near the truth. Fuel prices in Russia are up 20% probably is a more realistic figure if you look at the whole of the country and average it out. Also, for the debt auction, something interesting happened with the first auction. We had another growth in the yield. So if you remember last week, it was 14.5%. This time for the first auction, which raised 64.5 billion rubles, the yield was 14.8%. However, for the second auction, which raised only 20 billion rubles, it was 14.2%. 204%. So I expect that the yield is going to grow now that everyone knows that the government needs to raise a lot of money till the end of the year and fast. So I expect the yield to keep either staying at this higher rate and not falling down below the 14% mark, or even grow above the 15% mark. And I think that's it from me for this week.
Okay, thank you very much, Stanimir. Very detailed report as always. Next, we move to a very interesting topic. Erlend has assembled quite a panel, an illustrious panel, to discuss this matter. So very briefly, I just want to say there have been so many incidents in Europe this week related to drones that it's almost impossible to keep track of all of them. We've done our best, and I should also mention that usually when media things like this happen, there's like everyone's got their eyes on the sky, and so then suddenly things that would normally be just viewed as like a routine thing are now like lumped into that category of like, oh, we're being invaded. So we're doing our best to make sure we're covering the incidents we have the most information about, and we'll just talk about kind of the implications. So on September 22nd and 23rd, there was a multi-hour shutdown after a drone that Denmark authorities said was capably operated was seen in their airspace. There was another shutdown in Denmark on September 25th through 26th. Danish officials again publicly said the airport disruptions were the result of like hybrid warfare, basically. There was on the 27th, also in Germany on the 25th to 26th, there were some drone sightings, and the State Interior Ministry opened investigations into espionage. So it sounds like Russian stuff. And then Norway on the 27th, there were drones sighted inside a restricted zone of their airspace, and the reporting indicated that it was some type of Russian hybrid stuff. And then, of course, also Denmark on the 27th. And this morning, similar things. I won't, same things that always happened in Denmark before. And then there's also an incident a few incidents in Sweden, which we'll talk a little bit about. They're not 100% sure that it's we don't have as much public information about the stuff in Sweden, but from the 25th to 26th, there were some there's some drone activity over some Swedish islands, and I would say the reporting in Sweden generally is that it's likely related, since all this other stuff's going on. There have been a few other incidents that have been reported, but a lot of them have more to do with either it's an amateur operator that just chose a real bad time to fly too close to an airport or something like that. So there have been a few, I guess you'd say, not false alarms, but things that are more standard happening that are being treated as extra because everyone's attention is on this issue. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Erlend and his great panel, and we can just talk about kind of the implications of this massive uptick in Russian drone activity in Europe. Erlend, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. So this, of course, started with the news in Copenhagen airport, which was closed down. A few hours later, similar incident, or unverified until now, but it also basically resulted in Oslo airport closing down for several hours. And since then, Denmark has had quite a lot of incidents, in particular. Together with me, I have 122 and also Federico Bersari, so I want to welcome them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start with 122. You've been watching this quite closely. What's been happening in Sweden?
As mentioned, we don't have too much public information on the matter. The reason for that, we do not know if it's the government choosing not to share it or such. But there have been several sightings in the south of Sweden. One was in conjunction with the one that was one of the first over Kastrup in Denmark. The drone was also spotted near the southern tip of Sweden, and it was a large UAV of some sort. And we also had sightings up in the north near what's called the Riksgränsen, which is basically where the three borders meet up there with Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And then just the night the other night? We had sightings of drones over one of Sweden's largest naval bases, and those were not ordinary drones. They have been confirmed that they are of a higher grade, so to say, so they're not amateur drones flying around. So we've had what you would call direct incidents where there have probably been reconnaissance of Swedish installations, and we had some that might be the drones just passing by whilst doing reconnaissance over Denmark.
And then, of course, Extrabladet did this helicopter flight towards one of the ships that has been monitored and spotted by both civilians and, of course, official instances just off the coast of Denmark. And they flew out with the helicopter, filmed it, and photographed it. And as soon as the helicopter came close, the Russian warship left. And I just want to emphasize that this ship was in international waters, even though if it was within the 12 nautical miles from the coast of Denmark, there is a little strip of international waters there because of the right of passage due to the law of the seas. So it is a very tight strip of water there. So the 12-mile rule doesn't really apply. Federico, have you been observing this as well?
Hi everyone, hi guys. Thanks for having me. Yes, of course, tracking all these sightings and incidents of drones that apparently are flying over quite important infrastructure or potential also military sites. So this is certainly something that I closely watch, but I am not surprised, if I may say. This is, there are not many informations about the type of drones that have been identified or spotted in these, incidents, as all the other panelists have said. But if they are larger than, of course, commercial grade drones, this is clearly something that is either supported by someone that has malicious intent, or even by Russia directly, either through people that are connected with Russia in some way, that have potential access to Russian drones or other type of technologies that they can use for these purposes. but I'm not surprised. And there have been a lot of incidents also in the past few years, at least since the full-scale invasion started. And I think it's quite worrying to see this happening. And the thing that is most striking to me is the fact that many often there's no clear authority on how to deal with this type of incidents, or if there is an authority, is the entire machine that needs to be activated for responding is very slow. And so drones can fly and can take pictures or collect information about what they're seeing, what they're intercepting, maybe depending on the payloads that they have. And then the operator is able to most likely to collect all the information it wants. And so this is worrying, definitely. And I think this is also the perfect case for really changing our approach to this type of problem. So far, we have dealt with it in very I would say calm and methodical way. But sometimes it's necessary really to take more precautions first, and also have a more aggressive response, I think. The problem is that many times there are unclear rules on who has the authority to intervene and what type of means they can use. And there's a similar problem also in the US. We have seen it many times, with drone incidents in many air bases in the US. So who is in charge for intervening or taking down the drones? Many times it's not clear, and the mandate is really I would say poorly developed and poorly also enforced. So this is really a wake-up call for authorities to do more in terms of regulation, in terms of also giving the necessary mandate to either the police forces or gendarmerie, or depending on the country, of course, to if necessary take down the drone. So yeah, this is the general reaction to the events that have been happening in the past few days.
Yeah, so the one of the problems here, and also when analyzing it, is that different European countries have different instances of government that have the official responsibility. One thing I want to make clear, though, is that at least when it comes to Norway and Denmark, the police can ask and obviously will ask the military for assistance, but the official information will be relayed by the police. That is the normal command structure when it comes to this, until it has been declared as an hostile act from a foreign power. That's when the military will take over most of the responsibility and coordination. But yeah, this is obviously a problem, and one of the things that it heightens this confusion is also that many of these drones may, and you can probably answer this better, Federico, it may be a civilian platform. It doesn't necessarily need to be a military style drone. It can be bought on several Chinese websites for quite normal sums of money. That it doesn't necessarily need to be produced by a defense manufacturer. But we know that the Russians are exploiting these things when they conduct their hybrid warfare. So it doesn't exclude that the Russians are behind it, but it makes it more difficult to ascertain and make it as a stable fact for the authorities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really easy for anyone that has interest in supporting Russia to buy a drone or receive money to do it, and then commercial drone, of course. and then deploy it, whenever is more interesting for them. And so the problem is that having access so easily to this type of technology, including very capable commercial platforms that you can buy for a few $1,000s today, and they can do really a lot of things. It's super complicated also to keep track and make sure you don't have malicious or malicious actor, I would say, to use commercial platforms for this purpose. But it can also be some civilian that is not very knowledgeable about the regulations and is flying its drones when it should not. So it can be also an unintentional use of drone by civilian people, of course.
So 122, it seems to me that Denmark has been particularly, or maybe has been particularly unprepared for this. But then good neighbor Sweden has offered help, right?
This is correct. Exactly what the help consists of is unclear. What kind of systems we're talking about, I have suspicions, but I don't want to speculate too much about what it can be. But we have offered the assistance, and from what I can tell, our stance on this might be a bit more forward than Denmark and Norway has been. That means it looks like we might be eager to engage a target that we can find. But this is just my gut feeling on this, and from what I've heard. So we are eager to help our neighbors on this for selfish reasons as well. I can just add to this. We had last year, and I think even the year before that, we had a lot of drone sightings near nuclear power plants in Sweden, also by drones that were large and not commercial grade, but they were like dispersed over time. And one common theme with that was that there was some Russian ship near the coastlines with all these sightings as well. So just an coincidence, if you want to call that.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think there's been some joint coordination between the Nordic states. One thing that kind of made me furious, but at the same time, I'm happy that they finally made the decision to make it public, is that the Norwegian government has made it official that Russian aircraft did violate Norwegian airspace 3 times only this year, and before that, we're talking about decades before or since the last time that happened. Kind of infuriating that they kept this secret. I understand that there are reasons for why you would do it, but I think it's more negative than positive, because people need to know when these serious things are happening, and now it's out. I hope that they won't hide it the next time it happens, because this is serious and people need to know, or else we won't be able to pressure the politicians with when they need to act. So we'll see. But it's kind of serious that 3 times in the less than 12 months, Russian military aircraft violated Norwegian airspace with the transponders off and not responding on radio.
Yes, for anyone in military circuits, that's highly irresponsible, just to say the least, on how to operate. And it's also a sign that you're hiding your intentions. And yeah, that should be a no-brainer on what they're up to. So yeah, and it's also important to say that the government and the military needs to get this stuff out to prepare the populace of our countries, that this is the reality. This is happening. This is going on. It is serious, and the more people know about it, the more pressure they will be put under. So we need to be ready, and when they're hiding it, doesn't feel like we are ready.
Yep. One thing I wanted to ask Federico about is how difficult is it to actually do anything about this with either kinetic means or electronic warfare? Because a lot of these drone sightings have been above populated areas.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. You cannot, in most cases, it's basically impossible to have the authority to use kinetic countermeasures over populated areas in Europe. It's simply impossible. And just to give you an idea, it's basically very difficult even to test kinetic countermeasures for drones in military testing ranges. There needs to be a clear provided authorization to do that, and you need to go through a very lengthy and slow bureaucratic process. And just to give you a practical example of this, a few weeks ago was in Latvia for an exercise precisely about this topic, about counter US and US tactics, and we couldn't have any use of kinetic countermeasures because the testing range we were at was not authorized to allow us to use those. And so all the exercise was basically based on soft kills solutions. It was very interesting nevertheless, but just to give you the sense of how difficult it is to use kinetic countermeasures, right? And so I was not entirely surprised when we had the incidents, and actually incidents is not exactly the right adjective here, but the intentional drone use by Russia in against Poland 2 weeks ago. So I think it's really sometimes it's difficult to use it, and simply because you don't have the authorization to do it. Of course, it depends probably on the situation, but most of these incidents on critical infrastructure or military air bases, you simply cannot use kinetic. You have to use other means, and you need to have the trained personnel to use those systems, and that is not always the case. And for instance, in the exercise I was attending that I mentioned, I was really struck by the complexity of using certain type of systems and countermeasures, because the technology is really there actually in terms of what you can do, right, with the sensors and with the effectors, electronic warfare, for instance, jamming, spoofing, or other means. But at the same time, it's very often the operator needs to be really well trained and experienced to use those systems, because the command and control interface sometimes is a bit complex to read, and it's not very quick to use. So you can need, for instance, a few minutes to decide what to do when the sensor pick up the drone. And so all this time it's really not ideal in certain situations. So so as I mentioned, the first thing is to have the personnel trained for using the systems, but actually the first thing is also to have the systems in place. So if the governments, for instance, are so slow in realizing the seriousness of the problem, and they don't acquire the systems, or they don't place the contract with industry, then it's really difficult to deploy the necessary countermeasure in a timely fashion and to have them operational, because the operators also need to have the time to train with them. And so it's a vicious cycle of slow government approach to this problem set, that at the same time reverberates on how fast militaries can put the systems in place and have them operational when it's needed. So I think we are very much lagging behind here, and Ukraine is the perfect interlocutor we should really engage with and do it much more than we are doing now. And so I was not surprised to see that Ukraine offered help with Poland, and I mean it's good to see that Sweden is really available to help also in this sense. But except for a few countries, I would say maybe the Baltics are more proactive in this respect. But I think in many European countries we are not really realizing yet the magnitude of the problem. So it's curious to see Denmark at the center of this issue now, because I was in Denmark a few weeks ago also for another research I'm doing, and they were very committed to invest in not just drones but also counter drone, but apparently they are still working on it. So hopefully I think things will improve, and governments will also place the contracts that industry need also to produce the system. But when it comes to the countermeasures, and in your question, Erlend, kinetic is quite and I would say 90% of the time off the table unless really something serious happen. And so most law enforcement agencies and even the military are exploring soft kill solutions. So jamming, spoofing, cyber takeover is another way as well. The problem is that for many commercial drones now, there are workarounds to make the drone quite resilient to some of these countermeasures, even though of course it's not drones are not immune, and if you have a good combination of different techniques, it shouldn't be too hard to go after civilian drones, of course. But the problem is you need to have the operators trained and operational as well. So yeah, it's a combination of many different factors. And so, yeah, it's not an easy problem, and we are too slow, I think, at this moment.
Yeah, I noticed that the Danish government is exploring the possibility to ban all civilian drone flights for a certain amount of time. I think that next week is on the table already because they have a very important meeting in Copenhagen. The government in Denmark are pretty direct. They say this is a hybrid attack, and that I guess that means that they have, even if they can assume it, I don't think they would have gone out with this kind of information unless they had pretty strong evidence that it is a professional hybrid attack and that they suspect a state being behind it. And if we look at all the other drone incursions in Europe, they've all been from Russia, right? So we like to look at patterns when it comes to these kind of things, because it shows intent. Something that we're going to talk about in the next segment as well. It applies to these kind of things. It applies to violation of human rights and war crimes as well. And the pattern here all shows, or it all points towards this being most likely from Russia. So we can't determine it here because we don't have the information, of course, but the government in Denmark seems to be pretty adamant about it. Do we have any further comments or any other thoughts from the panel about this?
Real quick, I did want to talk a little bit about like Russia's statements about it, I guess. As usual, it's like talking to a psychotic person, so it's a little difficult to even understand like what their view of it is. But the general understanding that I have is that the Russians officially have completely denied it. They basically just said, like, you guys are crazy. There ain't no drones. But then this week there was like the UN General Assembly, and Lavrov was there. He made a statement that was very inflammatory. It's like, it seemed to me like it was kind of a justification for all the provocations against Europe, something like that. They were basically saying, well, Europe's supporting Ukraine so much at this point that they're basically a co-belligerent in the war. And like sort of statements like that, and it sort of implied like that's why we're messing with Europe right now. But then I want to say like a day later or something, a reporter was talking to him, and he sort of completely walked everything back, and he was like, what? We're obviously not at war with NATO. That's stupid. You're stupid for suggesting that. So it's been a complete psychotic break from Russia, as usual, when it comes to their diplomatic stance on this. But that seems to be their general like attitude, is they're denying it, I would say, is the more prevalent of the two responses. And then the other thing is worth mentioning is that the Moscow Times had a story that like there was some kind of a meeting with European officials where the Russian diplomats were like basically mad about what's going on in Crimea, because as we've been talking about a little bit, Ukraine's been hitting Crimea pretty hard as of late, and they're running out of gas, as Stanimir said, and they're also getting hit radar installations and transport planes and things like that. Lots of strikes on Crimea by Ukraine. The thing that's weird to me is like I don't have any independent evidence that like a meeting between Russian diplomats and European diplomats took place. You would think that that would be something that someone would know about independently. So it seems like a little bit of a, I don't know, like a random story from the Moscow Times. I'm not sure if it's legit or not. But that's my general report on like what the Russians are saying about it. Do you guys have any speculation like why the Russians are doing it? Do you think like are they spying on facilities that they want information on? Are they trying to like intimidate Europe into like backing off? Like, what do you think is the goal here? Obviously, it's speculation, but
To me, it's a bit too. I'm just basing this on military experience, but to me, there are so many targets that have been affected by this, so it more seems like a sort of psyops that wants to cause disruption and cause disunity on how to address the matter, and disorganize the coalition, if you want to call it that. But with this, if it is who it is doing this, you can never trust them as well. It might be a preparation for something, but I don't see them having the capability to strike all these locations. So more likely for me, it's an intimidation slash effect, ongoing support for Ukraine, and switch focus for all these countries to other places. What it seems to me more like, but who knows?
Yeah, if I may just jump in very quickly, I think I agree. I agree with this, and I think it's not necessarily spying on a military facility. In these cases, I mean, Copenhagen Airport. I don't think it's a major target for Russia in this case, but I think it's more. Try to see, provided that Russia is behind this, which might very well be the case. But I think it's more like trying to see also what's the reaction to this type of incidents. What's the approach that European countries and NATO in general use to deal with this type of situation, in order to have a better sense of what's in the realm of possible for Russia in a potential contingency, or if they want to increase their hybrid gray zone operations using drones. So it's more like to map the type of reactions, whether it is in Denmark or Norway or Sweden or other countries. So it's more like I'm curious to see how they react and what they do. So I think they can use their satellites to have, information on military facilities and key installations. Of course, drones are very useful, but it's easier to to deal with them and to spot them. So yeah, it's more like mapping the reaction against drones. That's my take.
Yeah, I think the strategic decision to do this is mostly about trying to understand NATO's response and also the individual countries' response. But this message that was broken by Bloomberg, that apparently Russian Russian foreign ministry had told European diplomats that as long as you stop helping Ukraine attacking Crimea specifically, these things will cease to happen, which is a very strange way for the Russians to communicate. They never admit guilt, right? So this is kind of a way to admit guilt, but it could also, if true, because we don't know if this is true, it hasn't been verified, but if true, it could be a sign of desperation. And this is, the map that Daniele and other people at Tochnyi has been creating, just mapping the targets struck in occupied territory and Russia by Ukraine since June. And this is obviously very scary for Russia because they're losing air defenses in Crimea. And we've seen an exceeding amount of attacks that are successful in Crimea, but also recently down the coast, the Russian coast of the Black Sea. So if it's true, I think that there is some sort of desperation from the Russian side politically as well. But I do agree that most likely this is the strategic decision about with doing this is to test us most of all, and then obviously also collect certain kind of information about our air defense capabilities and response times, etc.
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, exactly, Erlend, you just said it. It's not just testing, the reaction, but also, from assessing the reaction, you also gain some type of information that can be useful, as you said, like what kind of capabilities they have there, or are they prepared for a drone incursion? So this is all useful information at the end.
And also on the political side, I want to mention that the Russians do know that, unfortunately, the allies of Ukraine that are supplying Ukraine has been laying restrictions on what Ukraine is allowed to hit inside Russia, and probably also in occupied territories. And it seems like with the change in the White House administration, most countries have given up on those restrictions to a certain extent, and we don't know the reasons for that. Personally, I think it's because Trump really doesn't care and doesn't understand this. So Ukraine kind of tested the waters, no reaction came, so they're continuing with these kind of strikes. Maybe they're trying to exert diplomatic pressure on the allies to force Ukraine to stop this, as they did in the past, which obviously has been a big problem for Ukraine. They had success with this in the past, so maybe they're trying to achieve it again. Just a thought.
I think you're like reading between the lines. If we again, like, we don't have any confirmation that this statement about Crimea like happened for sure, but this is something that off the record has been said in Russian circles, and maybe also some, if Bloomberg has a different source, maybe some European circles. But I'm mostly aware of it on the Russian side. They reported this. As you said, it like sort of makes sense if maybe there's something going on in Crimea, but that said, like, the vast majority of the strikes in Crimea are done by Ukrainian assets. Like, like Russia can be mad about this all they want, but I don't think at the end of the day, even if they said it's off limits to Western missiles, it would kind of stop the pain that's happening in Crimea. I mean, right?
Yeah, in theory, yes, but then you have the other political and diplomatic kind of influence that the allies have over Ukraine. They can basically just say, you have to stop this, or else we're not going to help you with our missiles for other.
Good luck. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think the ship has sailed a long time ago. So this kind of political power and influence over Ukraine was a thing in the past, and I think it's pretty much off the table now. So. But
so
the Russians are suffering these attacks, and I think it is a piece in the puzzle for why the Russians are suddenly doing all these provocations into Europe. Personally, I think the Russians are doing a mistake, but time will show. Maybe we are weaker than we think, and we won't respond. I hope not.
Yeah, that was kind of my final thing, was just like, we kind of can speculate why Russia's doing it, but I think the more important thing is, like, is it working? I think the general answer is, as you said, Erlend, I kind of agree that it's a strategic mistake, but I think normally it would be really complicated, like, how do we respond to this? But Russia has been stuck in Ukraine, and I think the general response from Europe should probably be, oh, drones, huh? That's crazy. Anyway, we're going to be giving Ukraine another 8 billion euros for drones. You know what I mean? Like, Russia has made the response pretty simple here. We just give Ukraine more capabilities or resources every time they do something crazy like this. And I don't. To me, that seems like the correct answer. Is there anything else you want to say to wrap this up, Erlend?
I think we covered the topic quite well. I mean, we could probably sit here and talk about it for 2 more hours, but we will come back to this situation in future streams, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Russia's going to be stopping anytime soon, since we didn't shoot down many of these drones, Erlend.
Yeah, that's true. The Russians will continue to do this until we respond somehow, either by shooting down the drones or giving Ukraine something that we haven't given them before, and basically stating publicly that this is the reason why Ukraine is receiving it, and then something burns and explodes in Russia. That's kind of the 2 options we have. Okay, I'm gonna do the transition to the next segment.
Do it.
Because it's a lot more depressing, but equally important. I want to welcome Brendan to the stream for the first time in a very long time. Hi, Brendan. I hope he's awake.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Cool.
What an introduction.
Well,
I was a little bit scared there, but yeah, Brendan, how have you been doing?
I've been busy. I've been very, very busy with Newsmap.
Yeah. So can you describe, for those that haven't heard you on the stream before, what you do for Tochnyi and for Ukraine Daily Update?
Yeah, absolutely. So my primary role is data entry and organization kind of mapping to some extent. It's not really geolocation, but just sort of aggregating news stories from different official sources, mostly police reports, prosecutors' offices, and the different civilian and military administrations, and then putting those out every day. I do the day before. So you'll have yesterday's news today at some point. But that's my primary role. And then when I have sort of time left over, I'm really invested in researching war crimes in Kherson, specifically the human safari drone attacks against civilians, primarily non-combatant casualties is really what I research for the most part on the side. And I like to write about that weekly in my own little newsletter.
Yeah, and you also did a couple of long investigations that you published on Tochnyi.info got quite a lot of attention, because I think you were one of the first Western people to cover this in depth. What actually caught your eye? Why did you start to cover this, and more or less when did it start?
Yeah, we were one of the earliest groups to notice it, but I think that's because we have the advantage of being involved with Ukraine Daily Update in analyzing all of the drone footage that comes out from both sides of the conflict. So we had access to the Russians releasing drone strikes on civilians primarily. When it started, there's debate. I've heard reports from journalists in the area who were in the area shortly after the destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam in summer of 2023. And so like midsummer heading into fall, maybe there was a start point there where drones started to be used against civilians more than not. And then we saw that become a pattern over the course of like the next 6 months to 8 months leading up into the summer of early summer of 2024. We saw in like mid-June to mid-July, somewhere in there, was the sort of beginning of a steady climb in civilian casualties that suggested it was more than just indiscriminate attacks or collateral damage, right? Like there are situations where civilians could be near military personnel, right? And a drone with a fragmentation warhead hits nearby and the civilian could be collaterally injured, right? But what we started to see was evidence suggesting that that's not the case at all. And the video evidence we were seeing was suggesting that's definitely not the case. These people were being specifically targeted with FPV drones. It started out not as FPVs, actually, I should say. It started out with Mavics, mostly reconnaissance and artillery units who were using the Mavics for aerial reconnaissance and targeting and BDA. So they started to carry IEDs and drop them on targets, mostly energy infrastructure, but over time it became transportation, and then just certain units were already more or less hunting civilians. Depends on which unit you're talking about and what time period you're talking about. Some are worse than others. But it slowly grew into a pattern across the entire riverbank. We know Beryaslav was probably where it started initially, with like units like the 205th Motor Rifle Brigade and BARS 30, I believe, or 33, sorry, BARS 33. And those units were attacking northern Kherson and Beryaslav, but that shifted. Not many people really talked about it while it was happening, but sort of Beryaslav had its peak human safari sort of more or less in April to June of 2024, and then that shifted down to Kherson city itself in June to July of 2024. So I think DW was the only outlet that actually reported on what was going on in Beryaslav to a real to any sort of real degree. But Kherson got a lot more attention as fall 2024 came around. I think it was probably in September, October, we were on here talking about like 200, 300 casualties from drones within the Kherson urban Hermata, which is like the immediate sort of urban area. It's a couple of these villages surrounding the main city here. And right now we're looking at just over 2,000. We have 2,365 drone casualties as of September 7th since January 2024. And that's across the whole oblast. So I noticed this uptick. I saw, I think it was like an 86-year-old woman was reported to have been killed by a drone in Antonivka one of the first days that I was working with Andrew's team. And I asked Andrew, I was like, what? Like, why? You don't hear about this if you're not tracking the war really closely, you don't necessarily hear about this in the media, and it became clear to me that there were patterns emerging of old people being hit. And Andrew had said he had seen elderly people being hit by drones in some different unit channels. And so I decided to investigate it a lot further and found that, right now it started off, I think in August, it was August of 2024, we were looking at like 2 units. And I've got like over 50 Telegram channels from different units that do this sort of thing on different parts of the front. So it's not even in Kherson anymore. It's all over the place, depending on who's rotating where, or just, different units adopt the tactics. I don't even necessarily think that there's personnel being trained in Kherson and being rotated out to different units. I haven't seen evidence of that personally. But that's one of the theories that's going around as to what's happening. But I think Human Rights Watch and UN, with their investigations in May, both concluded that it's more or less a form of ethnic cleansing. They're trying to move the civilian population through terror out of Kherson, depopulate the city, and in hopes of occupying it. I tend to agree with that theory. It does seem to me that there's concerted offensive efforts over time. Not that there are anything serious, but it does seem that there's like concerted Russian efforts to try and establish footholds on the Ukrainian held bank and eventually interdict supply routes, and put the city under siege and actually try and take it back at some point in the future. But in terms of the Russians having the equipment to do that right now, it's not really the case. So you have to resort to these like small infantry tactics that we've seen across the front line, where it's like 3 guys in a boat instead of 3 guys in a thermal blanket. So that's more or less the story of what's happening here. It is getting better actually a little bit just recently, but I don't want to say much more than that. It's just we're in a lull right now, like the last 2 weeks, thankfully.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, who are doing this? Is it one unit? Are there many units? And what do you see any common patterns in who's publishing these videos and actually perpetrating these attacks?
Yeah, there's some different larger formations that are involved that you could probably look at, like 18th Combined Arms Army and 49th Combined Arms Army and their subordinate units. So I believe in the 49th, that's got the 205th Motor Rifle Brigade in it. I don't know if Bars 30 is part of that as well. But we do know there are some territorial regiments that work up in the northern sector, like the 1854th. They carry out most of their drone strikes around Chervony Mayak, sorry. And we know 70th Motor Rifle Division, they had 3 infantry regiments that were basically stationed more or less in Oleshki, hitting Antonivka and the immediate coastal area. Down towards the southwestern edge of Kherson, you had the 61st Guards Naval Infantry Brigade, but 61st Guards Naval Infantry Brigade and 70th Motor Rifle Division, they're all gone. They are either currently involved in offensive operations in Donetsk Oblast or preparing for, in the case of the 70th, they're preparing for an assault on Konstantinivka, I believe. It seems like, based on Unit Observer, they said 61st was already engaged in combat in that giant naval infantry meatball that they're making there south of Pokrovsk. So I think the 61st we won't have to worry about very much anymore. The 70th we won't have to worry about very much anymore. Another unit that was notorious for these same kind of war crimes, they're no longer in Kherson. They're attacking south of Zaporizhia into the Kamyanska Stepnohersk area. I know there's actually been an uptick of civilian casualties from FPV drone attacks, which that tracks with that unit moving. Scorpions 328. They're the 328th Air Assault Regiment of the 104th Guards Air Assault Division. They are a fairly notorious group when it comes to the perpetration of war crimes. We had also linked them to the murder of a child in June with War Unit Observer. We were able to tie the 104th Guards Air Assault Division to that because of their use of Molnia drones in some cases. So you see like certain units, and I saw Andrew making this argument earlier about Rubicon, but different drone units have different access to different technologies and different supply chains. And I think also their parent armies have different access to different supply chains, and that can dictate a lot of what the unit's able to do in terms of what kind of terror they're able to carry out. If they have Molnia drones, right? So if they're naval infantry or if they're air assault, they will have access to Molnia drones in Kherson, and they will be able to hit, 30, 40 kilometers deep, which is pretty disruptive for logistics in the rear. Although Molnia drones, there's a lot more involved in launching them, and it's not as easy to manage as a regular FPV drone. But we have seen like sort of magnates of the Russian drone world, like Moses. He is directly responsible for giving technology to certain drone units. So like certain drone units won't even share tactics or technology with each other in order to help each other out, even if they're stationed in the same area. It seems like there's a lot more competition, and technology is hoarded between or amongst units. So we saw a unit recently attacking the M14 highway, which runs between Mykolaiv and Kherson. They were called Delta Team. I don't think they're in Kherson anymore. They haven't posted recently. So they could be 61st or they could be 70th. One of my working theories is they might be the Kherson detachment of Rubicon that nobody knows anything about. But we know the M14 highway was being basically cut off. There's been mixed reporting on that, right? So like over the summer, it was cut off on several occasions, and they do actually, even today, I think the M14 was cut off once by drones today. They have a radar system now that sends out telegram alerts to civilians so they know not to travel. They've started within the last year building drone tunnels. That's something that the locals have been very critical of the administration. They've not been able to build proper CUAS infrastructure within Kherson to protect.
Yeah, I've seen that lately. There's emerging pictures of nets being put up over the streets in Kherson, and also a lot of small concrete shelters that are similar to the ones that Israel has deployed all around. So civilians that are in the streets have somewhere to take shelter when they're far away from a bomb shelter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and those aren't necessarily 100% effective, but yeah.
Yep. I see that they have open entrances, which is not necessarily good. But this is an enormous topic, and we tried in Tochnyi to do something about the accessibility of information about the extent of all of this. So we had an idea together with you and Constanze and several other people like Jonathan and Chris have all collaborated on this project, where we wanted to visualize at least some of the information that we have, because I think it's important to be very clear that it is not all information that you and the team at Ukraine Daily Update with Andrew's crew has collected, but it is one category within a certain time span. And we created this map that we finally managed to publish now on Tochnyi.info. It's been long in the making, and it starts in January 24th. But can you describe a little bit what kind of information is relayed on this map?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all data collected from Kherson Police, Kherson ODA, the governor of Kherson, military administration, and the prosecutor's office as well. So I go through these casualty reports and I take down the different demographic data and the general location, and then using some basic coordinates, general locations, and a little bit of artificial intelligence animation, we were able to build out sort of a rendering of what this looks like at a visual scale over time.
Yeah, and what do the individual dots represent here? There are red dots, blue dots, purple dots.
So any given dot is a casualty incident, or it could contain multiple incidents. It depends on the different markers. Blue markers will be for first responders, so any casualty events that involved police or medical professionals. And then you'll see purple, that is for fatalities of civilians. And then red is a wounded civilian. So you can also click on the dots and get the demographic information for each civilian casualty. You will notice, right, some aren't necessarily, like some of the civilians are included inside the first responder bubbles, but that's because they were reported in the same source, and you can actually click on it and go to the source and read for yourself exactly what happened. So that's accessible for everybody. I wanted to make sure everyone could actually check the sourcing and see some of the demographic info.
And these are not precise geolocated dots, because we basically don't have any means of precisely geolocating all of this, but there are approximate locations represented on the map, right?
Yeah, approximate locations. They're all within, probably at most a couple kilometers from where they actually happened. More than likely, stuff that's in Antonivka is going to be really close to where it happened. So the logistics involved in getting in on the ground and actually going to these locations is impossible to actually go and verify all of the locations of these places, because you would be targeted by a drone, and you have like a 1 in 10 chance, I think some people have said, of getting actually hit by a drone if you're in the city on any given day. So we had to use we had to use a rendering.
But we do have a lot of data with geolocated footage. And are there any plans or ideas about what should be done with that data?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have, like, especially on Ukraine Daily Update map, we have lots of geolocations of these attacks. You can cross-reference geolocations with this demographic data, and in some cases, you could probably identify or confirm a geolocated event with one of these reports. I'm not able to do all of that. I've done that for a good amount of casualties that I've written about myself in some of my articles, but this is a monumental task. It's thousands and thousands of events that require confirmation, and we do have thousands of videos from this AO.
Yeah, and hopefully with the help of more powerful AI tools and more volunteers, it would be possible to document and actually show people this in one collected map with a database and the sources and everything, so that whoever is interested in either exploring it or who are actually doing some sort of investigations can use this as a tool. That is already possible through Ukraine Daily Update, of course, but you would have to click through all the dates, which is a little bit different.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It would require a bit of work, yeah, and some volunteers would be great in order to make more headway in this direction. And we do have plans to expand the map to other areas of the front, specifically other areas of Kherson Oblast, and then maybe areas of Kharkiv Oblast that we're working on right now.
Yeah, and if you're interested in learning more about this specific topic and also to join the project, then please check out the latest article that is published on the Tochnyi website, where we explain in more detail about the map and the project that Brendan is working on. And in the bottom of the article, there is a link to a form where you can sign up if you're interested in helping with the mapping project. And if you're interested in this specific project, please, write a little note about that you're interested in helping out with Brendan's work. I think he needs help, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the panel, or have you seen any questions from chat about this, Joseph?
I haven't seen any questions about the Kherson map. There are some questions about the Europe drone stuff. And I know some of the guys on the panel there might have to get going soon. So should we just hit those real quick?
Well, yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Brendan, Constanze, and everyone that has helped with this project, Jonathan, Chris, and also if you are interested in helping us getting the message out, I will post the link to our promo tweet that is promoting this map and the article. I'll post it in the chat right now, and then I'll post it in the video description at the end of the stream. So if you want to give this topic a little bit more attention, please help us retweeting and liking this post, because it is underreported in the West, and I think that is one of the main motivations Brendan has, right?
Absolutely, yeah. More people need to know.
Okay, thank you so much, Brendan, and I hope to have you back on the stream soon. Please stay for Q&A. Joseph, please shoot out the questions.
Yeah, as I said, or as Erlend said, thanks for the map, guys. It's a really, really great job on the map, and yeah, thanks for all the efforts of everyone on the team. Okay, so we got some questions. So I think there were like a couple variations on like, why is Denmark being targeted so much? That's, I think, a good question. Like, why is Denmark the epicenter of all these incidents?
Would 122 or Federico answer that?
I have speculations, but I'm not sure. You have the fact that Denmark has agreed to open up a factory on their soil for Ukraine. I think it was Firepoint, the company, is going to produce fuel for Ukrainian missiles, if I'm not mistaken. But as someone also mentioned, it could have something to do with Denmark being in the presidency of the EU as well. There could have something to do with that, because there's not much else with Denmark that is of value, so to say. No offense, Denmark.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, jokes apart, I think I agree. I think Denmark has been one of the most, forward-leaning allies that are supporting Ukraine. Besides the factory in Denmark proper, they are, investing a lot of money into Ukrainian defense industry with the Danish model. So they are very, committed to that cause, and so I think the Russians are not very happy with that. The European, the presidency of the European Union also is an important aspect as well. I think that's a great point, and I would add to that Denmark is also about to become much more involved in NATO presence in the Arctic and North region, and especially with the new NATO command in Finland. I think they will play a role there as well. I'm not sure if they will commit troops anytime soon, but I think they are planning to do so. And so they will be more involved in that part of the NATO bordering region with Russia. So yeah, they are very, very much involved.
Okay, thanks, guys. And I think there's like two questions, but I think they're kind of similar, which is what would it take for the rest of the West to stop trying to block the actions and to start, doing something more proactive? Like the metaphor they're using is like just blocking the punch versus jabbing back. And then someone else asks, like, is this a good tactic to not respond to Russia's provocations, or is it better to respond? Like, in other words, it'd be irresponsible to overreact. So it sometimes might make sense to not directly respond, but when are we not responding enough? So I think those two questions are kind of related. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
For us that know Russia, is that Russia responds to force, or rather, if you show force, they back off. And Sweden has a history of dealing with Russia, so we know, not as maybe well as the Poles and the Baltic countries, but we still know what they're capable of and how to deal with them. We just haven't shown it yet. So I hope, from my part, I hope our government will show a more stern side now and actually decide to, when it's appropriate, to actually use force against at least the drones. I think if there's another incursion like the one we had in Estonian airspace with actual jets, I think there's still a way to go before we actually see a force response against that. But I think we might see an actual shooting down of a drone soon, hopefully. But who knows?
Yeah, I think it's also it depends also on the degree of agreement between different countries on this aspect, especially at the NATO level. There needs to be consensus on how to deal with this thing, which is an obstacle in a sense, because there are so many different opinions, which is sometimes difficult to reach an agreement on that. But when it comes at least to the drone, I completely agree. At a certain point, you cannot allow drones to freely roam in your airspace and crash into civilian houses and take pictures of everything. So with drones, at least, I hope as well that there will be a more robust, more I would say kinetic type of response if it's necessary. And I think there are some discussions about it ongoing. So it really much depends on the situation as well, because drones are very different from fighter jets. So I think for now, the type of incursions and violations of airspace from fighter jets are still very much in the same type of category that we have seen in the past few years, even though they are becoming more frequent. And so I hope there will be also more presence and more robust, let's say, infrastructure in place to deter the Russians to do so. Which you need the capabilities for that, though. But when it comes to drones, I completely agree, and we really need a more proactive response on that. But there needs to be political consensus, because otherwise it's up to us, any individual country to react, and there are so many different approaches. So.
We asked a former Air Force, I think he was a general, I don't know what his role was, but I think we should ask them the same question, Erlend, which is like, is the answer to this like a wall of lasers? Like, what do we do here?
Yeah, so last week we had Greg on, and it was fantastic. It was the former next in command of the Royal Air Force, so Air Marshal. That is a general rank. That is true, Joseph.
Yes.
Greg Bagwell. So he's a great guy, and he does really good comments and analysis on the specific kind of air threat in Europe and general security situation in Ukraine and Europe. He said that this is difficult. There isn't necessarily a one-phased response. It's all about layered air defenses. We won't have a wall of gun-based or laser or energy, any kind of energy system that is going to be able to intercept all of these drones on the border towards Russia. That is not physically possible. So we're going to have to do similarly to something that Ukraine is doing, that is focusing these kind of counter UAS capabilities around critical infrastructure, strategic targets, and then we will have to do something to show the Russians that this is unacceptable behavior. And the general was very adamant that at some point we have to shoot down Russian aircraft if they cross a line. But that is very complicated business when it comes to command structures, rules of engagement, etc. And it all comes down to a political choice in the end. NATO can give the individual countries that are performing air patrol missions in the Baltics, they can give them rules of engagement, which allows them to shoot down Russian aircraft without asking for a political mandate. That is possible, but obviously that is not the current rules of engagement that they're operating under. So, Greg is a lot better to talk about this than me, so please go and listen to the episode that we had last week, and follow him on X and Blue Sky, because he really gives good insights.
Yeah. And I guess like my one other question is, I think last week I reported that Ukraine is, or was it this week, that they're gonna, I think it was this week, that they're going to make a separate branch of the military for drone defense. It's going to be part of the Air Force. I assume kind of like the rest of the air defense. Do you think that's something that like Western militaries should look into, making like a separate branch for this?
A separate counter UAS branch? I'm not sure. I think we need to wait and see how the Ukrainians are doing this. I'm also kind of skeptical to how this is going to work out in the Ukrainian military. At least I don't think we're going to see results of it very quickly, because the most capable interceptor units are not in the Air Force right now. They are in other units spread all over the Ukrainian military. And I highly doubt that they're going to reallocate those teams to the Air Force. But they might start a new branch with new units with the best technology that they have experience with, and the best tactics that they have observed over the time that drone interceptions has been a thing. This is obviously a speculation from my part, but just as it was a lot of talk about Ukraine starting a unmanned systems branch, it took quite some time before that actually materialized, and still it isn't operating like a branch yet, although it is being commanded by a separate structure. It's still a reform that is going on, and it will probably take some time. Federico, maybe you have other comments, because you studied this a lot more than me.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really much depends on the proficiency of the units that will be allocated to this new branch, if it goes as it is planned. So I don't think it is necessarily a good thing. And also it takes some time to train the operators for this, for the systems that they want to use for this specific task. And if they have to train new people, I hope the most proficient units that you mentioned that are very often integrated in other units or other branches as well, will be those who will train the new operators, but it will take time. And so it's I don't think it will be a very easy process or a very fast development. And besides that, there are and this is speculation on my end as well, but there are many ways to approach a specific problem set, and it doesn't necessarily take to create a new branch for that. For instance, Ukraine and Russia, both Ukraine and Russia created a dedicated service, right, for unmanned systems operations. But at the same time, there are European countries that are not very inclined to do so, and because they think it's not necessary for their forces to create a specific branch, and instead they prefer to integrate drone technology within the current services and the current force structure as they have it, of course with modifications in terms of echelons and units. But they don't want to create a new branch. So it really much depends on the approach that every nation has in this type of things. But of course, interfacing with Ukraine and having a better connection with Ukraine and discussion about this, it's critical, because you can learn a lot from their experience. And then you can decide whether it is good for your military if you need it, also considering the context, the operational context you have to operate into, or simply go with your own approach. So it depends on a lot of things, but it's not necessarily the unique solution for that problem set. But I'm curious to see how Ukraine will do it, of course.
Yeah, it is also possible that the branch will basically be a command structure, and the units are not going to be separated out from their current units, right? That is a possibility. I think that will be the most logical thing, because these units are spread out all over the front line under various different brigades and regiments. And they need to be closely integrated with those units that are fighting in the area. We'll see how it's going to be organized, but I don't think it's going to be like the unmanned systems branch.
Okay, Erlend, do you see any other questions we should get to before we maybe close out with the Moldovan election stuff?
No, I was gonna throw that ball to you, because I saw there were questions about that in the beginning of the stream. I have found the official.
Yeah, that looks like the best one to pull up, I think.
Yeah, I found the official polling, or not polling, but the counting page from the Moldovan government. I haven't been following this close enough to speak about it, but there is an election in Moldova today.
Yeah, big election, Moldova. I reported in my news report they outlawed a specific member. So there's something called the Bloc Patriotique. Helpfully, they have a big old Soviet star as their logo, so they're the bad guys. And like one of the parties was basically like directly tied to like Russian influence operations, so they were sort of outlawed, and that was kind of big to do. But the general, people are asking in the chat, like, what are the results right now? The general results are pretty positive for, I guess, like your pro-European advocates, or I don't know what you want to say, but the good guys. I don't know what else to say. PAS is like Sandu's party, and as you can see here, they've gotten like a pretty good amount of the vote. I think they're in a coalition with like some of these other parties. The Patriotic Bloc, or the Bloc Patriotique, is like it's a collection of like pro-Russian parties, so that like sort of unified to try to basically, it doesn't look like they're doing super good according to the current vote totals. So yeah, why is this important? Probably because if this government that's formed is solidly pro-European integration, then it's very likely that they'll be like part of the EU accession process, and like eventually Moldova's status is this like weird semi-European state will be finally resolved, and they'll be solidly like integrated into the European Union, and like free from Russian influence, at least as free as the European Union is. I don't know, Erlend, is there anything else we should say about it? I mean, like, basically, if you want just a quick summary, the result is, so far looks good for people who are in favor of European integration for Moldova.
Yep. And that's going to solidify Sandu's presidency, which is interesting. And it's also going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with the Moldova-Romanian relationship in the future, because that's obviously been developing in a positive direction, I would say, under Sandu. Another thing that is going to be interesting is also going to see like the aftermath of this election, because there's been a lot of not just police investigation, but also open source and media has revealed massive Russian influence operations where people have been offered money to post Russian propaganda, and basically they're not hiding what they're doing. They're just calling up people and saying, hey, do you want to have 200-300 euros to post this and that on your social media to influencers, etc. So that's some of the stuff I've seen. There's probably a lot more. I know there's criminal investigation against various actors in Moldovan politics that have received quite substantial amount of funds seemingly from Russia. So yeah, we'll see. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the developments there.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging that a country like Moldova, which isn't safely tucked into NATO and the European Union, if anyone should be afraid of Russia, it should probably be Moldova, and they're standing up. And it seems like, as you said, Russia really pulled out all the stops on this and tried to really sway this election result with all kinds of crazy tactics. And none of that worked. It seems like the Moldovans are pretty clear that their future's with Europe, and no amount of like Russian influence or intimidation is going to change that. So I don't know, like it's encouraging, I think, for people who are maybe want to see less Russian influence abroad. I don't know. Yeah, I think we can probably close out here, Erlend. Do you think, or is there anything else you want to cover?
I think that was it.
Cool. Yeah. So definitely want to thank everyone on our panel this week. Thanks to 122 and Federico for stopping by and talking about the current situation in Europe. Yeah, I don't know. Do you guys want to say anything before we head out? I don't know. Like, I usually ask Colby if he published stuff, but I don't know if you guys are publishing. Cool. And then also thanks to Brendan for stopping by. Brendan, as Erlend said, great job on the map. I think it's a really impressive map. I hope we keep working on it in the future. And I don't know. Thanks, of course, as he said, to the rest of the team. Anything you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, I just emphasize thanks to the rest of the team, especially Constanza and Chris, who really helped with that, and a few others in the basement who do geolocations and also track units and stuff. We're going to lean on them a little bit more in the future for some other stuff we have planned. So thanks to them.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And Brendan and team, John Ridge and team. Also, thanks, of course, to Stanimir for his weekly updates. He worked hard on that map. And thanks, of course, again to the team who helped him with the map. Man, there's a lot of stuff happening this week. Thank you, chat. Oh, thank you, German aid to Ukraine. I don't thank you enough. You did a good little report this week. And thanks to myself. And thanks to Erlend, of course, for doing all the production work this week. It's a lot to throw together. And then, of course, thank you to chat. Thanks for all your questions. We appreciate it, guys. There's a lot of great questions this week. We always like your feedback. We like to know what's on your mind. It helps us kind of calibrate what to talk about to inform you guys. Thanks for your support. Thanks for liking the stream. Thanks for spreading the word about us on the social media. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching the video after the fact. If you weren't able to tune in live, we know not everyone has time. So thanks so much for all your support over the years. We really appreciate it. We'll be sticking around. Someone, as you guys saw in the YouTube chat, came to deny the Russian gas crisis. That's like, you just got like the firsthand experience of what Stanimir's comments are like. And I don't know why they would be so mean to Rybar. You know, it's like he's just trying to put out a nice map. So yeah, I don't know. Thanks, chat. You're always lively. We appreciate it. Thanks to the VOD watchers. And yeah, we'll see everyone next week. Same time, 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Heroim Slava.
Heroim Slava.
Heroim Slava.
On behalf of the brave.